Hey everyone, Livy here, back with another video. And this time I am doing my October Musings video. This is to check in to see how my month went. And to be completely honest, I'm just gonna rip off that band-aid now. The month of October really fucking sucked. I'm laughing because if I'm not laughing, I'm just crying about it. October was awful. I wish I could say it had been a better time for me, but this was by far the worst, like one of those worst health months for me I have ever in my whole entire life experienced. So, to explain, I'm going to start with health bits before I get into why. Okay, well, actually, I was not surprised. At the beginning of this month, I was not surprised that my month was going to be like this. Let me actually start with that before I talk about the rest. I was not surprised that my month was going to be shit because, for my 6 months ahead spread, as you can see here, my card of the month was the Three of Swords. Oh, it's trigger warning for sorry for spiders. I'll just cover up the spider. Anyways, Three of Swords was my card of the month. And that basically told you and told me everything you fucking needed to know about this month. I was going to be in for a really bad time. And unfortunately, this was not one of those situations in tarot where, oh no, this card is not as bad as it seems. No. This was just as bad as it fucking seemed. It was awful. And kind of to explain, I'll just, this spider's going to trick somehow. I'm just going to flip that over. Okay, anyways. To explain, remember the last time I did a monthly musing, I was talking about the month of September and I was like, wow, my health's really bad. Took a turn for the worst because, I got a UTI. Yeah, that was just the start. That was just the start of very horrible things. So basically, after I got my UTI, I'm reflecting on this now. I'm pretty sure the antibiotic I was on started to make me ill. So I got a cold, okay, after the UTI. That cold spiraled into a really bad sinus infection, which spiraled into, guess what? Another freaking UTI. So basically, the whole month of October, I was just in health hell. It was just health hell. I had a really bad time. And by the way, because I was doing not so good, my headspace was basically this from the Lucifer Tarot. These are the backs, by the way. I was really freaking depressed. Clouds, it felt like the clouds were here, even though it was really hot for most of October in my part of California. It was just not a good time. Not a great time. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it this time. It was awful. And unfortunately, as I film this, I'm barely coming out of... No, that was actually the kicker. The kicker is that UTI, the second UTI I've gotten now, they put me on stronger antibiotics because of it. And yeah, those antibiotics, I'm pretty sure, made me sick again. So I started having food poisoning, or I thought it was just food poisoning, but I'm pretty sure now it's from the antibiotics. Made me really sick. And I basically had to stay home 1 week. Literally the day, as I'm filming this, it's very early November. So it's literally the day of, the night of Halloween, after I had to stay home from work. So the 1st of November. So that basically rounded up that month, right? It was just really awful, as you can see here. Really not great health-wise. Oh, also because I had to go in and do stuff with my car, and on the same day that I found out I had a UTI. So it was very anxiety-inducing because there was a lot of time crunch in there. So when the Three of Swords, right? We talk about the Three of Swords. And sometimes people just assume, oh, because it's the heart being stabbed through, it's heartbreak. I would like to propose that this card is not always just heartbreak. This card is about drama. when you see this card pop up, when the Three of Swords enter your life, it's not always that you're going to break up with your ex or whatever people think. This card comes to tell you that your heart is literally breaking because everything freaking sucks. It's not like, it doesn't have to limit itself to like relationships, right? It's just everything is in catastrophe. And unfortunately for me, it was. And I wish I could say it was better than this, but it was not. I'm trying to laugh about it now, but I'm like still struggling. My stomach, as I'm filming this, my stomach is barely recovering from whatever the hell is happening with the second antibiotics. So I'm not in a great spot. Not gonna lie. But talking about tarot and other things hopefully is gonna cheer me up. So instead of that whole pity party, now let's kind of move on to what I was trying to do in the month of October to cope with my life basically falling apart around me. Okay. Film-wise, I'm trying to remember. Did I watch anything? I think I did actually. I was starting to watch, well, not just film, I guess like film and TV. Let's put it under that umbrella. Because my life was really sucky, I was actually not gonna lie, watching a lot of like reality shows on Netflix. There was this like silly one, I can't even remember the name of it now, but it was like a survival thingy on an island, but it was like hella staged and fake, and they were like kind of party animal people. So I don't remember what that's called, but I'm pretty sure it's the same people who make Too Hot to Handle. I don't know. It was in that vein, basically. I was watching one of those reality shows just because my brain could not process things some of the time. But when I was not watching that, I started watching, was it this month? I think it was. I started, oh man. Okay, just so you guys know, I'm a big Star Wars nerd. And I started watching Ahsoka. And if you don't know what anything about Ahsoka, I'm going to tell you, go watch the Clone Wars, the animated Star Wars show. Go watch that show, then watch Ahsoka, and actually watch Rebels too, Star Wars Rebels, and then Ahsoka's show will make sense to you. If you have not seen that, you won't be invested in the characters. You really won't care. That show was literally just made for me, people like me who love the character of Ahsoka from Star Wars. So that made my heart happy. I watched that show and I liked it. I personally liked it because it made sense given the plot line and all that stuff. But again, that's too much to say for others. Besides watching Ahsoka though, I also watched, what was it called? Oh, never mind. I remembered. I watched on Disney, actually. I was watching their newest rendition of Goosebumps. I liked it. It actually had some moments that were kind of creepy, and you guys should just know right off the bat, I'm kind of like Weenie Hut Jr. when it comes to like what I can handle horror-wise, but it was the right balance for me, and so I liked the Goosebumps show. I watched that too. And then, of course, on Halloween, I watched Hocus Pocus. And I also watched Hocus Pocus 2 because I just wanted to see if it was as good as the first one. And I don't know if it was as good as the first one because here's what's embarrassing. I was already starting to feel not so great at that day on Halloween that I I fell asleep part the way through the movie. I'm going to have to try to watch it again. But even Halloween was not as like fun as it could have been because, I work at a school and all the kids are dressed up and I was dressed up as like I don't have a picture of that. I would have put a picture right here if I could. But I had a cool like black and orange dress that was like bats and stuff. It was cool. I was just basically just Halloween for Halloween. And then, was there anything else I watched in the month of October? I don't think there was anything else I was watching. To be honest, it was hard sometimes to focus on TV, but those are the things I kind of watched in between, I believe. So that's films and TV. Let's move on to books before we get into the tarot. But spoiler alert, I can tell you now, I barely did tarot-ish stuff during the month of October. I will explain closer to time, and I will show the decks I use because I still pulled my weekly cards and stuff, but yeah, it was not as much as it could have been. But let's get into the books. I actually read, guys, can you believe? Drum roll for me, please. I read 5 books in the month of October, which is at least better than the freaking month of September when I really thought I was like not doing great. So I'm going to take that as a win. Books were actually killing it for most of the month, not going to lie. So I actually had a good time book-wise. Let's talk about one of them. Okay, the first book I read in the month of October was Tales from the Hinterland. For those who don't know, Melissa Albert, she is the author of, The Hazelwood. Okay, The Hazelwood was her first book, and it's basically like a dark fairy tale like book. This is actually, what do I describe this? This is basically, this book is actually like winning. When you look inside, it's like winning. Look at it. Look at the cool illustrations and the red and black theme, and so good. This is so good. Anyways, back to what I was talking about. This is a dark fairy tale book. This is literally a book of tales that were talked about in the Hazelwood. So these are dark fairy tales. Like, I mean, you could argue that regular fairy tales are actually kind of dark because a lot of the originals did not have happy endings, but this was kind of the same way, except taken to an even, in some ways, to me, it seemed more extreme way. They were like very much veering on horror, but I liked it for once. Again, I can be more Weenie Hut Juniors. If you're going to read this book, though, I would advise looking at, I don't think they have them here. I was trying to see if they do, but I don't think there's any. No, sometimes books actually have like trigger warnings. It's not saying it, but let me tell you now, check out trigger warnings for this before you read, because while it's fairy tales, it does cover a lot of dark themes. A lot of things are involving death and killing and potential sexual assault and all kinds of things in this. So just be aware of that ahead of time if you want to check it out. But this was a good read. Again, because I read The Hazelwood and the second book, and I like both of them. But yeah, this was a good one for me. I would say, I mean, so the way this book is structured, like they're fairy tales, so they're kind of like short stories. And I actually like the majority of these. So I would say this is like probably in a 4.5 for me. I wouldn't say it's a complete, I mean, I enjoyed it. So I guess you could say it is a 5, but it's not like the greatest gift to mankind. I don't know. 5s are hard to give ratings for. It's close. It's close for me, but yeah. Just be aware of the trigger warnings. Okay. Next book that I read in the month of October was also horror leaning, and it was this one. This is called House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. My goodness, I loved this book. This one, I mean, okay, here's the thing. Would I say the writing at times was the greatest gift, again, the greatest gift to mankind? No. But for me personally, just for me, this was a 5-star read. And I'm going to explain why, okay? The reason why for me this was a 5-star read, House of Hollow, was because I liked the direction it went. I had a feeling it was going in that direction. Like, it was easy. It's kind of easy to figure out at the start. Like, yeah, okay, I can see that this is going towards that ending. But I like that it went with that ending, if that makes any sense. This is a story about, let me see if I can find it, yeah. So Iris and her 2 older sisters, right? They basically disappeared as children from their hometown. They used to live in Scotland, and they come back a month later, and they are not the same as they were. And what's worse is they cannot remember what the hell happened to them. They don't know. They don't remember. People try to ask them. They tried to do a whole investigation. They couldn't figure it out. Then slowly over time, they used to have basically dark hair, and I think it was like blue eyes. And then appearance completely changes slowly as they, come back home, so that all the sisters have like basically white hair and black eyes. So they go through a big transformation basically, but they claim none of them can remember what happens to them. So this book goes into what happens when the oldest sister goes missing again, and the other two have to figure out what the hell happened to her. This book is basically, what am I trying to say? This book is basically Stranger Things plus like kind of dark fairy tale vibe. I don't want to get too much into it in that sense, but it's kind of like combines the two ideas, if you want to think of it that way. So it's an interesting book. Again, look at trigger warnings, because there's a lot here, especially like self-mutilation, which I, again, normally don't care for, but it's like self-mutilation, potential assault, very much assault, death, a lot of morbid things, bugs crawling out everywhere, and blood, and there's a lot. So if this is not your jam, don't read this. I was surprised how much I liked it. Maybe because this is more YA, it's like YA horror instead of like, I guess if it had been adult horror, but it's not even like full horror. I don't know how to explain. Maybe thriller would be a better term for it. This book kind of felt like it was crossing some genres. It's like horror fantasy too, if I wanted to put that more correctly. So House of Hollow, really liked it. This would not be for everybody, but because I was just having fun and I wanted to keep reading it, just for that reason alone, it's a 5-star. But again, others could argue one way or the other, especially because one of the characters, I could say, if I really have to critique, thought she could have been developed a little better, but her character made more sense by the very end of the story. So I'm letting it be. It is what it is. I just really liked this one. Okay. Moving on from that, the next book I read after House of Hollow this is going to be one that I think a lot of tarot people, if you like YA and you like tarot, this is basically the book for you. This is called All Our Hidden Gifts. And this is by Carolyn O'Donoghue. This is an Irish author, and this story does take place in Ireland. It is about our main character, who I believe, what was her name? Oh yeah, Maeve, okay. Maeve, Maeve is basically at this all-girls boarding school, and she's portrayed as kind of a troublemaker. Not really, though, but she's like she's just not as academically forward as some of the other kids. She kind of like speaks her mind. She's trying to fit in a lot, kind of be like a class clown-ish kind of character. One day she gets detention, and while she has to clean out the shed, she finds a deck of tarot cards. Yes, this is very, very tarot, okay? She finds a deck of tarot cards, starts to get really interested in tarot. It's actually kind of funny because this book does talk about like her going on to TarotTube basically and like looking up videos and stuff so she could try to learn. She's a very intuitive reader, and she starts doing this thing where she's doing a service at her school where she's giving tarot readings for people. But one of those readings goes wrong because her ex-best friend asks for a reading. They get into a big argument, and basically the ex-best friend goes missing. So they have to figure out what the hell happened. Like, where is she? What's going on? Because one of the cards in the deck was basically an extra card that might have been cursed. That's the most I'm going to say about the plot, but I really enjoyed this. Would I say writing-wise this was better in House of Hollow? Probably not. I enjoyed this series too because it was more diverse in the sense that one of the best friends she starts to make is Filipina, and the other one, who's also her love and interest, is I don't know, I can't remember by the end of the book if he kept he pronouns or if he changed to they them, but basically her love interest is non-binary. So there's just a lot of good queer rep also in the book that's talked about, and it dives actually into a lot of really interesting concepts that ties in like religion and like teen sexuality, but like being light at the same time. I don't know. It covered a lot of great topics, and also like the intersex of being like queer. For those reasons, I would recommend this if you like all that stuff. If you like YA, though, because again, it does definitely read like YA, but actually in a good way, I will say. It's like if I had gotten this book as a teenager, this would have became my whole identity, basically, but I didn't. So, like, for that reason, I can be a little bit removed from it. I would say this is like solidly a 4 read for me. I do actually want to read... And it's a 4, by the way, because there's some moments where the writing execution could have been maybe a little better. And definitely check out some trigger warnings for the ending, because the ending does get a little graphic with like blood and self-mutilation, some other stuff. And also just like religious, I guess some for religious trauma, but really good one. 2, I just say 4 because, like, again, there could be more to it for it to have been a 5 for me. But I am interested in continuing this series. This does have other books. I just want to make sure I read more books in my TBR before I get back to this one. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's how I also know this isn't a 5-star read, by the way. Because if I can wait to read the next book, then I know I'm not like wholly hooked in, but it's still a great read. And again, this is for basically the tarot community. So you're going to see this book again, by the way, very soon, but I'm not going to spoil why. But yes, all our hidden gifts. Great one. After that, I read this book. This is called Payback's a Witch, and this is by Lana Harper. This book... This book is interesting. How do I explain this book? The premise of this book is basically if you combined like witchy concepts with and like romance genre, but you smashed it with like Sweet Home Alabama. It's kind of got those like vibes. I don't know how else to explain it, but this is about what was her name? Oh, Emmy. Okay, Emmy. This girl named Em, or not girl, she is a woman. This is an adult romance, by the way. This woman named Emmy who goes back home to visit her family because they are about to have a tournament that happens, I guess, every 50 years in their town, where the 3 ruling witchy families have to fight it out to see who will be the ones to have like the most magic, I guess is what it is, for the next 50 years. But this is also a romance, guys, and it's actually a queer romance, specifically sapphic. So if you are hooked on that idea, cool, this might be the book for you. I have to say that the problem with this book I had, is that it was doing so much in so little that I feel like this book needed to be bigger than it was for it to have been 100% successful for me. So for me, I would actually say this is more like a 3.5-ish read. I enjoyed it. Like there was like 1 or 2 spicy kind of like, like sapphic scenes that made me like happy. But this book was just trying to do too much. And let me explain that, okay? They're trying to do a romance with also... This is basically Sweet Home Alabama plus witchy themes plus John Tucker Must Die. And the reason why I say that is because there's the payback involved is that the main character's best friend, and then this other witch who's like in the town, who, by the way, is love interest to the main character. They basically band together to try to get back at... they're like a mutual ex that they all have, which is this kind of like he's basically shown as like the D-bag like ex-quarterback kind of trope, and they're all trying to get back at him because his family is the one who has all the magic and they're always winning and all this stuff. So the reason why this is a 3.5, though, is that it was just trying to do too much at the same time. It's trying to do the revenge arc at the same time as trying to develop a romance, but at the same time it's trying to do this, like, witchy tournament thing. Like there was more that could have been done with the magic in this world, if that makes sense. It wasn't, it was trying to do this big like tournament epicness, but it was in like such a short condensed period of time for each of those scenes that it didn't feel, what's the word? It didn't feel like it had enough time to explore some of those world building themes. Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm like hiccuping all over the place. I'm going to drink some water. But for that reason, this book just, I feel like it just needed to be bigger so that some of these themes that were going on in here were more fleshed out. And also just like more of the romance stuff. But the romance was like cute. It was cute. I don't know what to say. Like they are cute. It's just I feel like at the same time it almost felt rushed though because of like all the other stuff that was going on. So yeah, this was like a 3.5-ish read for me. This is Paybacks of Witch. Cool cover though. And yeah, great concept. It just, and I feel like it just needed to be bigger for it to explore all these themes. And finally, the last book that I read in the month of October was called The Monsters of Rookhaven. And I believe the way that you pronounce this name is that it's very close to being like Patrick in like Gaelic or whatever. So I think it's like Padraig. Patrick Kenny. Anyways, this book. This is a middle grade. This is, it's kind of like supernatural fantasy middle grade. This book is basically like the Addams Family meets, I'm trying to think of what else. But it's kind of like, it goes into more like Addams Family kind of vibes, okay? And it's about this family that lives in this house, but they are all actually monsters. But they have a bigger monster threat than them that is threatening to come through and destroy everything that they have built in their house and with the family. And there's also this bit with like the town. There's like a town next door on the human side of things that kind of protects the town, gives them food and all this stuff. But there's a lot of tension. This book is a middle grade. And this book actually, okay, I have to say, this book also has some like pretty good illustration games. So it had like good illustrations in it. Like pretty good illustrations in it. Oh, sorry. That's what I was going to remember. This is basically the Addams Family meets Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. So it's kind of like a mashup of both of those. If I had to really think about comping this book. But yeah, Monsters of Rookhaven. I would say because of, how do I explain this? I liked this book, but it's only a 3 for me. And I think the reason why is because this is even more hard for me to say because I'm actually someone who likes multiple POV books. But I felt like this book was too rushed because there was multiple points of view. So that some of them got developed, but some of them did not as much. But at the same time, I liked that this book touched on some really interesting things like grief, going off to war and coming back from that, and with the people in the town and stuff. Family trauma, child abuse kind of things where children ran away from home and all kinds of stuff was wrapped into this. It's just more of a matter of, I guess, needing, I don't know. I feel like it would have been tighter in some ways if there had been less point of view characters. I feel like there were too many, but they were interesting at the same time, but probably too many for a middle grade because, again, this book was not very big at all. I think it, like, actual page count, yeah, I was in basically the early 300s, so it wasn't very much, you know. So for that, this is just a 3 read. But yeah, these were all the books that I read in the month of October. But now, let's switch to what I know everyone who watches my channel really goes for, which is the tarot bits, okay? So tarot, oracle, all that jazz. What did I have in the month of October? To be honest, because my life was going to shit, I did not read I'm not read. Well, yeah, I did not read as much tarot as I would have liked. I wanted to do more spreads and stuff like that, and it was just not happening because I was not in a great headspace. But before that, I actually had one deck come into my collection during the month of October, and it was a full size of the Monsoon Tarot. Yes, guys. Oh my God, I actually have the regular standard tarot size version of the Monsoon Tarot. So this is not a new deck for me. For those who are not familiar with my channel, this is not a new deck for me. I've had the mini for so freaking long, but because the mini was cheaper. I did the Kickstarter for the Monsoon Tarot. The mini was a lot cheaper, and at the time I could not afford to buy the full size because the full size is a little pricier. So I waited and waited and I debated, and I was like, well, I love the mini. Why do I need a full size? But I'm kind of glad I got the full size because the artwork on this is stunning. I mean, I already knew the artwork was good, but because it's a bigger size, you can see a lot more of the details now, and they're more at the forefront. This deck is beautiful. It's on this really nice, or at least I like it. It's really thin though. Like, as you can see, it's like very bendy. And you might be able to tell. Yep, there you go. It's like that waffle linen cardstock. Very thin. The big version backs look like this. The mini almost look the same, except the color on this border here is not gray. It's like the same color as the inside. So this deck was a new purchase. Well, new, but it wasn't new to my collection. So I debated almost talking about it during this, but look at how stunning these are. Oh man, I just love the Monsoon Tarot. And I'm glad now that I have a full size because now I can show off the full size too. I still like my mini. I'm obsessed with my mini because it's still like a good travel deck. And the mini is much better, of course, for bigger spreads than this will ever be. The regular size, I mean. But the regular size now will probably get a lot of use just because of the detail. I could read for others with this more. And yeah, I'm just really excited. Oh, especially this card. This card looks so much better in the full size and then the mini. You can actually see more of the details, but this deck, this King of Air, but this deck, it wasn't a deck I actually used. It just came into my collection, but I wanted to mention that I now have a full-size version of the Monsoon, and it actually comes with a guidebook, except I've got to be honest, this guidebook's kind of pointless because all it gives you are some keywords and then even more keywords. So I might have to, I don't know. One day I'm tempted to make my own like version of this guidebook for the Monsoon because it is so good, and I feel like there's a lot more you could unpack with the cards that the guidebook just chose not to do. And yeah, so that was the Monsoon Tarot. But let's move on, guys. What decks did I actually use in the month of October? Well, you guys saw them when I did my when I said my month was the Three of Swords. These were the decks I used. I actually used 5, which is a little cheaty because I usually do 4. But it was the Raven's Prophecy Tarot, Disney Villains, Lillifer, Teeny Tiny Tarot, and the Darkwood. Okay, I will show them all though, but this was just a reminder. This was my card of the month. Let's start with the Teeny Tiny because it was the first one I could pull out. My tuck box is jacked, so yeah. That's why I have a washi tape holding it together. This is a tarot deck I definitely showed off more when I first started my channel because I was using it a lot at that time. These are the backs. These are the fronts. They are bridge size and they are thick or cardstock. If I was a riffle shuffler, I would be afraid to riffle shuffle this deck because it is thick. It is a thicker cardstock. I don't riffle shuffle though, so it's perfectly fine for me to use for just whatever. But anyways, this is a Teeny Tiny Tarot. As you can see, this deck really fits in with the month of October because its theme is basically witchy, spooky, creepy aesthetic. And all the cards in this deck are actually renamed. Swords are needles. Cups are skeleton heads, like pentacles are eyeballs. And wands are just sticks. Yeah, wands are just sticks. So this is a fun deck. This is a smaller deck. This is a good travel size deck if you still want something that's like a little bit bigger. But yeah, this is a fun one. I love this deck. Even though it can be, I would argue that this deck is more a pips with feelings. Because you can still look at the Seven of Wands and see that there's a conflict going on between these and those. That's what I mean. It's like a pips with feelings. So for that reason, except this card, I don't know what's... Well, I guess that's the big one and that's its legacy. But yeah. This deck is fun. As you can see, it's like a limited... It's not... It's like it has a very specific color palette and it doesn't really vary from it. But I really like that in this. Oh, this is one of my favorite Eight of Pentacles. It's just a fun time. The only thing I always mention is that my least favorite thing about this deck are the court cards. They are not the greatest court cards. They are just kind of lazy. They're like people, but they're all in the same stance. Like this. And it's really just that. You don't really get any other vibes from them. Like, they don't show anything of their personality. So, kind of disappointing in that vein. But otherwise, this is a really good deck. This is by Holly Audley. And I don't know. I just always take it out now in October. Since I've slowed down my use of actually... Well, because I have so many more decks now. I don't always go for this one. But yeah, this Teeny Tiny Tarot. I also used, in the month of October, my Darkwood Tarot Mini. Because, again, I've already talked about this. The reason why I have the mini and not the full size is because I hate Llewellyn's cardstock these days. I say these days because, well, you're going to see with one of my other cards, decks I'm going to show. I'm pretty sure the cardstock on that edition or that printing I had of the deck is different than what you get now. Because I think that one is more glossy now. But this cardstock is perfectly fine. I like this. Their mini cardstock for Llewellyn, great stuff. Shuffles easy. If you were a riffle shuffler, you probably would not have a hard time with this. But anyways, let's get into it. Darkwood Tarot. This is a tarot deck I was always kind of interested in, but never got to have, or never got, I guess, is because I've already talked about this. I had an opportunity to touch this deck, the actual like full size, and it had the glossiest, nasty cardstock I had ever seen in my whole entire life, and I just could not do it. I could not own it. I could not. So for that reason, I have the mini. And I think this is fine, actually, given like how dark and stuff this deck can get, that I'm kind of glad the cards are smaller too. So I don't have to get as much of a punch, if that makes sense, or get as creeped out by it. The artist for this, by the way, is Abigail Larson. Really great artwork, though. It's very old. I don't know. It reminds me of like the old 90s, like a lot of the illustration style that was going on in the late 90s. It's a good one. It's a good deck. I used it for at least 1 week reading. And then I also talked about this deck actually when I was doing the Tarot My Chart video. So I don't know. I have a feeling this deck is going to come out again, but I don't know if I'll just like randomly, sneakily use it in the month of November sometime or what. But I feel like I'm going to have to use this again soon because it doesn't feel like the end of our time, but also because it's a mini. These Llewellyn minis, by the way, I always throw these into a bag. They're always in like a travel deck for me. I have the Line Strider and the Everyday Witch also in this size, and it's fun to just take them around. So yeah, this was the Darkwood Tarot. But what else did I use in the month of October tarot wise? Before I get into my oracle, because I only had one oracle, I also used the Disney Villains Tarot during the month of October. I use this for the week of Halloween. And here's what I've discovered about this deck. I like this deck, but this deck is a fucking trickster. Maybe I should have known since it was about Disney villains. And my deck is, by the way, a little smaller in chunk because I took out a lot of the I took out the quartz because I'm trying to use them soon for a video. But anyways, these are the backs. Inside Edition deck. Disney Villain Tarot. I like this deck. I like the aesthetic of this deck. I was yearning to use this deck all month. The week I finally used it, it gave me the shittiest week you could ever imagine, which ended up predicting all the crap that happened again with my UTI. So not great. And I've also discovered, because of that, that this deck, guys, it's almost like the images that it shows on the cards or the things that it's talking about are more the shadow side. This is the vibe I'm getting. Maybe not everybody gets this, but the week that it showed me did not line up 100% to the cards that were presented. And it was actually the quite opposite of what the card's normally about. So I realized, oh God, yeah, this deck was showing me the shadow aspects of each of these cards. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to keep in mind next time. Is that some decks, not all decks work the same. And this might be one of those cases where this deck is out to like kind of trick you or to show the things in those interesting extremes. And I had a vibe from it that it was going to do that to me given the content. Like, it's talking about Disney villains here. I really like this deck. Like, I like the choices that are used in this deck. But yeah, it's presenting more of that shadowy side of things. So that was not the greatest. And yeah, because of that, I'm not sure when I'll be pulling this out again. But it's not like it was enough for me to go, oh, I never want this deck again. It's just one of those things where I'm going to be more wary next time I use it. But yeah, that was the Disney Villains Tarot. I also used my fave, my oldest tarot deck. This is the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. Once again, I always mention this, but I edged mine in this orange. It does not originally come like that. These are the backs. This is also a Llewellyn deck. But the interesting thing about this deck for me is that the way this cardstock feels, even though it's slightly glossy, it is not as glossy as I see people who bought this deck more recently have on their cardstock. So I wonder if their cardstock changed since I first got this deck, because I'm pretty sure I own like a first printing of this deck. I pre-ordered this deck when it originally came out. This is the Raven's Prophecy. I use this deck. I guess it just gives off some of those. To be honest, I don't really see this deck as like completely spooky. It's more of just a color aesthetic that aligns to this time of fall year. Like, I could literally use this again in November and be perfectly fine, or I could have used this deck in September and also been perfectly fine. It gives like that autumnal feel more so than like spooky for me personally. But I did use this deck during the month of October. I try to save this deck now because it is my oldest tarot deck. It is the one I am the most bonded with, has most of my energy in the cards, as they say. So for me, like, I have to be more precious with it. Like, the reason why I even edged the deck is because it was very noticeable. Like, if I go like this, you could probably see more. Like, it was all getting fucked up because this literally was the only tarot deck that I owned for like at least 2 years before getting more cards. But yeah, this is the Raven's Prophecy Tarot. Also use this for a week, one of my weekly spreads. But beyond that, I try to be more precious when I use it just because I want it to last forever and never and never. But I also used, during the month of October, I used a Lilford Tarot. This is the gold edition, by the way. I used the Little Fur Tarot for my first week of October because think about this deck I discovered. I love its aesthetic and everything. And it's also, I don't know, it just feels also very queer leaning of this deck is great for that reason. But these are the backs. They have the gold. So you guys can see it. There you go. This deck is great. See, very batty. And it's almost like they're little like demonoid creatures. But this deck wasn't the most October-y you could go, which is why I used it in the beginning of October, September. Because this deck, for me, personally, has very fiery energy. As you can see here even, right? It's just a very fiery deck to me. I feel like I'm going to be more called to use this next year during like Aries season and probably during the month of probably my birthday month, because I also feel like this is a very Leo deck at the same time. It's very, you could even argue, okay, well, Sagittarius December when you pull this out in December, and it just seems too cheery for December. I don't know. Like this wouldn't be a deck I would reach for in September. So that's like the weird conundrum there is like I would feel like I would probably use this again more in March and in summer. It feels more summery to me and springy. So for that reason, I love this cardstock too, by the way. It's just like, it's very thin and like bendy, but also just like nice. Really like this deck. But yeah, I only use it during the first week of October. And what's sad too is just because I got this deck after the time of year when I was felt like ready to use it, you know? I got it at the end of that season. But I really like this one. I did talk about this deck also in my Tarot My Chart video because yes, this feels like a very Leo, actually like what it feels to actually be a Leo kind of deck for me. So that was a Little Fur Tarot. And finally, the last kind of deck that I used in the month of October was my Oracle deck of the month, which happened to be Seasons of the Witch. This is the Mabon. Here's the thing. I know this holiday, for those who follow Sabbath, I don't really, but for those who follow Sabbath, I know that this happens in September. It does not happen in October. But this deck aesthetic is very October, okay? Like, okay, look at the freaking backs. You're going to look at the backs, the edging, and tell me I could not use this in the month of October? What the hell? Like, get out of here. This is my version of October. I know that the Samhain deck exists. I talked about this before. I'm a bitch. I'm sorry. I did not like the artwork that they originally went for, like the artist. I just didn't care for her art style for the original deck. So it was like Samhain. There was another one they did. And then Beltane. Somewhere in there. There was a couple. I just didn't care for that artist. I like this artist a lot better. And this feels more like my version of October and September and even November. I could use this deck again in November. But I'm actually called to use another deck for November. So I will not be using this one again. And I also have to say, maybe it's because I was in bad health, but some of the cards on this deck resonated with me, and other times I did not feel like I wanted to use this. And I think it's just, again, because I was just going through tough times. Like like a lot of the messages are nice still. It just wasn't working for me because I think I was just in, you know, fucked up like health and physical and mental health state, right? So despite how beautiful this was, I used it. I only pulled one card. These cards are bigger, by the way. These are like, I guess what most people would consider Oracle size cards, but I'm not a fan of the size. I prefer mini sized oracles or tarot sized oracles. I'm not as much of a fan of actual Oracle sized oracles. So, and this also is on the border of like what I can handle of glossy photograph feeling cardstock. It's like very sticky and like weird. I don't know. This is a rock pool thing though. Rock pool's card stock is like this, and I'm not a fan of it. I can just tell you now. But at the same time, I'm still eyeing that in bulk deck. I don't know because it's the same artist. I'm debating if I'd really want to use that one. Like really would actually use that one, but yeah, I ended out my time using my Oracle. I only pulled one card because again, these decks were bigger. Some of the cards resonated with me. Other times it just did not because I was not in the greatest headspace. And that's sometimes how it works with oracles. But if you've watched this long, thank you so much for watching. And I hope you guys had better months of October than me. I'm just saying. And I will see you all again next time. So bye for now.